Their shooting instructor literally said stop, but they didn't. Minutes later, they were dead. This video is about 8 times where people who received a direct warning from a professional but chose to continue anyway. Not because they didn't hear it, because they were certain it didn't apply to them. Owen Bassett loved shooting. 6 years of weekend range trips, a safe full of rifles and handguns, and the kind of quiet confidence that builds up when you do something repeatedly without consequence. His friend Troy Delmar was newer to it. Maybe 18 months of range time, a handful of weekend sessions, the kind of shooter who knew enough to feel comfortable but not enough to know what comfortable was hiding from him. They'd driven out to an informal gravel pit shooting site on the edge of a rural county road, the kind of place that doesn't appear on any official map, passed around by word of mouth, that feels like freedom precisely because no one is watching. But someone was there that day. A range safety officer, not official, not employed, just a local shooter with 20 years of experience who showed up at that pit regularly and had made it his informal business to keep things from going wrong. He was never paid to be there. He showed up because he'd seen what happened when people didn't know what they didn't know. He watched Owen and Troy set up their targets. He watched them choose their positions. And then he walked over and told them directly, the angle was wrong. Gravel pit walls don't absorb rounds the way a purpose-built berm does. They deflect them. The geometry of where Owen and Troy were standing meant that a round hitting the pit wall at the wrong angle could return, not with full velocity, but with enough force to be fatal at close range. The safety officer explained this clearly. He used the word ricochet. He pointed at the wall. He walked them through the physics of it step by step. Owen nodded. Troy said they'd be careful. The safety officer stood there for a moment longer, then walked back to his vehicle. 90 seconds later, Owen fired. The round struck the gravel wall at exactly the angle the safety officer had described. It came back. Both men were struck. Neither survived. The safety officer rendered aid until emergency services arrived. He had said everything that needed to be said in plain language with a physical demonstration. It made no difference, because Owen Bassett had been shooting for 6 years, and in 6 years, a ricochet had never happened to him. That was his evidence. That was his proof. His personal history had become his entire safety system, and it failed him completely. Here's something most people don't know about commercial shooting ranges. Certified instructors are legally and professionally required to intervene the moment a student's muzzle discipline breaks down, not after the session, not at the next pause, the moment it happens. There is no grace period built into the protocol. The rule exists because the window between a broken muzzle line and a discharge round can be less than 1 second, shorter than a human reaction time. Simone Krause was 29 years old, visiting a commercial indoor range for the first time with a group of friends celebrating a birthday. She had never fired a handgun before that afternoon. Her instructor, a certified range safety officer with 8 years of teaching experience, ran her through the standard orientation: grip, stance, trigger discipline, and muzzle direction. He told her where the gun could point. He told her where it could never point. He demonstrated it 3 separate times and confirmed her understanding after each one. Simone was attentive during the briefing. She asked good questions. She seemed to understand. But then, the session started. The noise hit her. The adrenaline hit her. And somewhere in the gap between instruction and execution, the rule stopped feeling like a rule and started feeling like background information, something that applied to other people who weren't as focused as she was in that moment. She fired her first few rounds without incident, but then she repositioned her grip mid-sequence, turned slightly to say something to a friend beside her, and the muzzle crossed the line. Her instructor saw it immediately. He called her name. He moved toward her and reached for the weapon. He was close enough. But Simone, startled by the sudden contact, reflexively tightened her grip. The gun discharged. The round struck her instructor in the forearm and traveled upward. He survived, barely. Simone did not. The investigation found no malfunction, no equipment failure, no procedural gap in the range's safety protocols. Just 1 second, one repositioned hand, a warning that had been given 3 times and failed to hold against the pressure of an unfamiliar environment. 3 demonstrations, 1 moment of inattention. That was the entire margin. Now, I just want to take a second to ask if everyone who is watching can subscribe so I can keep making these videos for you all and we hit the goal of 500 subscribers. Competitive shooters are among the most technically disciplined athletes in any sport. The training load is enormous. Dry fire sessions, live fire sessions, mental rehearsal, equipment maintenance, scheduled down to the round count. The precision required is genuine and hard-earned, but discipline and certainty are not the same thing. And Darnell Whitfield had spent 15 years building one while quietly accumulating the other. Darnell was a seasoned USPSA competitor, ranked in the top tier of his regional division. He hand-loaded his own ammunition, a common and respected practice among serious competitors, allowing for precise calibration of powder charge, bullet weight, and pressure curve. His standard load had been vetted, tested, and approved by his coach. But then, the week before a major regional match, Darnell decided to push the powder charge slightly higher. Not recklessly, methodically. He had consulted published load data from 2 separate sources. He had done the math. He believed the increase was within safe operating pressure for his revolver. His coach disagreed. Explicitly. On the morning of the match, the coach pulled him aside and told him directly, "Do not use the new load." The firearm cylinder had shown measurable wear at its last inspection, and elevated pressure interacting with a worn cylinder was a combination he was not willing to sanction, regardless of what the load data said on paper. Worn metal changes the math. Darnell listened. Then he loaded the new rounds anyway. On his 3rd string of fire, the cylinder failed catastrophically. The overpressure event shredded the forcing cone and sent fragments laterally through the frame. Forensic analysis confirmed it. The charge had interacted with the worn cylinder in exactly the way his coach had predicted it would. Darnell's experience hadn't made him careless. It had made him precise. But precision applied to a flawed premise is just a faster route to the wrong answer. He trusted his math more than his coach's direct observation of a physical component showing real-world wear. His math was correct. His premise was not. Most shooting fatalities don't happen at licensed ranges with certified instructors and posted safety rules. They happen in backyards, on rural properties, at informal sites where the only rules in place are the ones the shooters bring with them, and where no one is watching except the people who are already there. Avery Colton and Rhett Sundberg were friends in their early 30s who had set up an informal shooting range behind Rhett's property, a stretch of flat land with a dirt berm they'd constructed themselves from packed earth and old railroad ties. They had shot there before, multiple times, without incident. But then on this particular afternoon, a licensed firearms instructor named Paul, who lived on the adjacent property, heard the session being set up and walked over uninvited. He introduced himself. He looked at the berm carefully. He told them it wasn't adequate. A proper earthen backstop needs to be a minimum of 6 feet high, densely compacted and angled to trap rounds rather than deflect them. Theirs was 4 feet high, loosely packed, and had been saturated by heavy rain the previous week. Wet, loose earth doesn't stop bullets. It redirects them, and unpredictably. Paul explained this. He was specific about the physics. He told them the berm they had built would not reliably stop a centerfire rifle round under those saturated conditions. Avery thanked him genuinely. Rhett offered him a beer. Paul declined, repeated his concern clearly, and left his phone number on a slip of paper in case they had further questions. They resumed shooting 20 minutes later. The 3rd round. Avery fired past completely through the berm. It traveled 112 feet beyond it before striking Rhett, who had walked downrange to adjust a fallen target, something they had done dozens of times before without a second thought. Paul heard the shot from his property. He was the one who called emergency services. He had handed them his phone number 40 minutes earlier. The cardinal rules of firearm safety have been codified for over a century. They exist because every fatal firearms accident ever documented can be traced back to the violation of at least one of them. Muzzle discipline, trigger discipline. Treat every firearm as loaded until you have personally confirmed otherwise. Know your target and know what is beyond it. Gideon Marsh had been hunting white-tailed deer in the same river valley for 20 years. He knew the rules. He had written them on a laminated card he kept in his truck. He had taught them to his own son on that boy's first hunt. But then on a cold morning near the end of rifle season, he was crossing a rocky creek with his guide, a man named Ray, who had been leading hunting trips in that exact terrain for 15 years, when Ray stopped him mid-step. Gideon's rifle was pointed forward as he picked his way across the rocks. Ray told him to redirect the muzzle downward toward the water before he continued. Gideon said he had his finger off the trigger and his safety engaged. Ray told him that wasn't the point. The safety can fail on impact. The trigger can be snagged by a branch, a coat, a sling. The muzzle direction is the last line of defense, and it has to be maintained even when, especially when, the terrain demands your attention elsewhere. Gideon stepped forward anyway. His boot found a wet rock at the wrong angle. The fall was less than 3 feet. It was enough. The rifle struck the creek bed and discharged on impact. Ray was standing directly in the muzzle's forward arc. Ray survived. Gideon did not. 20 years of experience, rules he had written down and taught to his own child. None of it mattered in the 2 seconds between Ray's warning and the wet rock. Physics doesn't grade on experience, it grades on compliance, every single time, with no exceptions built in for tenure. Trap shooting is a sport built entirely on controlled repetition. Same stance, same mount, same swing, station after station, round after round, until the sequence becomes automatic. That automaticity is the goal. It is also, under the wrong conditions, the danger. When the body knows what to do, the mind stops auditing what the body is doing. Lena Voss had been shooting competitive trap for 11 years. She was technically precise, consistent under pressure, and well regarded at her club for her equipment knowledge and her approach to maintenance. But then, during a practice session, she noticed her over-under shotgun safety mechanism was engaging inconsistently, catching sometimes, releasing other times without a clean click. She field inspected it, worked the mechanism several times, and decided it was functional enough to continue the session. The range officer on duty flagged her before she moved to the next station. He had been watching her inspection. He told her clearly, "Take the gun off the line, hand it to an armorer, and do not fire it again until it has been properly examined by someone with the tools to assess the mechanism correctly." Lena told him she had already checked it. She told him it was fine. She mounted on the next station, called for the bird, and completed her swing. The safety had not engaged on that sequence. What followed was a cascade failure of the trigger group, the same mechanism she had inspected and cleared. The range officer's assessment had been correct in every particular. 11 years of competitive experience had told Lena she knew her equipment better than a range officer who had simply observed her for 30 seconds. She may have known it better under ordinary conditions, but the gun had already signaled that conditions were not ordinary. She decided she knew better than the signal. Brett Calloway had spent 12 years teaching firearms safety to civilians, law enforcement, and military personnel. He had certified over 400 students across that span. He was, by any reasonable measure, one of the most qualified people in the room in any room he entered. He had developed a close-quarters live fire drill for his advanced courses, a high-tempo sequence involving movement, reloads, and target transitions at close range. It was sophisticated. It was demanding. And every single time he introduced it to a new class, he prefaced it with the same warning. Do not run this drill without a qualified spotter physically present. Do not run it at full speed until you have completed it slowly, with a spotter watching every transition at minimum 3 times. He said it every time because he had seen what happened when people skipped those conditions. He had built the warning into the curriculum specifically because the drill's most dangerous moment, a reload transition at speed, was not visible to the shooter executing it. Only a spotter positioned correctly could catch it. He knew this because he had designed the drill around that exact vulnerability. But then one evening, alone at a private range after hours, Brett decided to run it himself, without a spotter, at speed. He had designed the drill. He had run it hundreds of times in a supervised context. He understood every movement in it. He was, he believed, the one person for whom the warning was unnecessary, its author, not its intended audience. The transition went wrong at precisely the point his curriculum identified as highest risk. At full speed, there was no natural pause in which to catch it. There was no spotter to call his name. The warning he had written, believed, and delivered to hundreds of students, he had decided it applied to everyone who had not yet reached his level of understanding. That distinction cost him everything. Ingrid Farrow had never fired a gun before the afternoon her employer booked a team event at a local shooting range. She arrived with no expectations, no prior experience, and no particular interest in firearms. She told her assigned instructor all of this before they began. His name was Frank. He had been a certified range safety officer for 9 years. He told her that her starting point was exactly right. Frank walked her through every step. He was thorough, patient, and specific. And Ingrid, unlike every other person in this video, did exactly what he said. Every time, without negotiation. She asked questions instead of making assumptions. She confirmed instructions before acting on them. She treated every directive as a directive. There was one moment midway through the session where Frank told her to stop, set the gun on the bench, and step back. Ingrid felt fine. The session felt controlled. She wanted to continue. She disagreed with the instruction in the way any capable, attentive person would, quietly, internally, with a reasonable sense that she was performing well and ready to keep going. But she set the gun down, because Frank had said to. Frank cleared the weapon, locked the slide back, and inspected the bore. He found a squib load, a cartridge that had fired its primer but failed to fully seat its bullet, leaving the projectile lodged partway down the barrel. If Ingrid had chambered the next round and fired, the barrel obstruction would have caused catastrophic failure at the point of her hands and face. She would not have survived it. Frank had no specific reason to suspect the squib at that moment, and it was a routine bore check, the kind he ran instinctively, every session, without reason, beyond habit, because 9 years of watching everything had taught him that the checks you run without cause are the ones that catch what cause hasn't surfaced yet. Ingrid's survival had nothing to do with her skill, her prior alertness, or the quality of her judgment in any other moment that day. It had everything to do with one decision she made in one moment when she disagreed with an instruction and followed it anyway. That single decision is the only variable that separated her outcome from everyone else in this video. 8 warnings, 8 professionals, 8 moments where someone decided they were the exception to a rule that had been stated directly to their face.